What if the family you built your life around gradually began rewiring history before your very eyes? In this explosive expose, we debunk the subtle power struggles, the shattered vows, and the turning points that altered everything within the Brown family. It's more than drama, it's a reckoning. You won't believe how far things have gone astray, and who's still lying that everything is fine. Watch now and discover what actually went on behind the smiles. Sometimes the loudest preaching for unity is done by the first ones to leave it. It's a phrase that might encapsulate the devastation, bewilderment, and silent unraveling at the core of the Brown family's narrative. There was a time when they believed in something bigger than themselves. A vision of love, faith, and family that stretched across 4 homes, countless children, and one unshakable promise. We're in this together. But the reality? It wasn't so simple. In today's episode, we're not only revisiting the soap opera, we're examining the gradual, agonizing reality of a family that appeared perfect on the surface and quietly disintegrating inside. Have you ever looked back at an instant and known it was the end of everything, but had no idea at the time? That's the type of instant we're discussing today. There's something profoundly disturbing about seeing a family struggle to keep it together with forced smiles and whispered rationalizations. But beneath those family get-togethers and birthday presents, there was bitterness, disappointment, and a dawning awareness that not everybody played by the same set of rules. Robyn wasn't the new wife alone. Time after time, she was the focal point, stealthy at first, then inevitable. The rest of the family was making do, compromising, attempting to hold together. Robyn was rewriting the story, redefining history as it happened, and Cody, he wasn't fighting it, he was reinforcing it. When did compromise cease to be mutual? When did love begin to resemble control? It's difficult to identify. Perhaps it was during the relocation to Flagstaff, so abrupt, so disruptive, and so evidently not concerning the entire family. Or perhaps it was when Robyn defied living in a trailer, while other wives silently accepted it years earlier. But the moment that truly lingers is when the other wives ceased resisting. Janelle, Christine, even Mary, all of them came to a quiet breaking point. Not with shouting or headlines. Just withdrawal. A shift. The kind of silence that speaks, "I've given all that I can give." And then the true story started. A story not just of a breaking marriage, but of women taking back their voice. It's simple to say someone left the family. But the fact is, the family left them before they ever walked away. Robyn's chronic confusion, her perpetual crying, her refusal to recognize mutual sacrifice, these weren't flukes. They were tactics. Perhaps not evil, perhaps not even entirely intentional, but effective. And Cody reacted to them with clockwork efficiency. The other wives, they weren't afforded that same mercy. They were supposed to be patient, supportive, quiet, even when their children were ignored, their funds diverted, and their emotional needs ignored. Especially then. It makes one ask oneself, what does it do to a family based on shared values when they stop sharing those values? We'll discuss that today. We'll look at how Robyn's carefully managed image played out over time, how Cody's shifting spiritual beliefs stopped reflecting conviction and started sounding like excuses, and how the children, once united in a loud, chaotic, beautiful blend, began to feel the cracks long before the adults were willing to say the words. And yes, we'll take that infamous night at dinner, the show, the sympathy, the quiet departure, the kind of scene that lingers with you, because you've experienced it before. Perhaps not in that same way, but in your own life. That instant when someone opens their mouth too wide, and just like that, you see the relationship for what it is. And if you're agreeing with me right now, thinking, I've been there, then you're in the right place. This channel, Sister Wives Daily Scoop, is where we discuss those deeper truths beneath the drama. So if you're not already subscribed, please go ahead and tap that button. I'd love to have you with us every time we unwrap another layer of this story. Because this isn't just a show about polygamy, it's a story about identity, control, power, and the quiet strength of women who finally chose to stop waiting for things to change. The Brown family didn't break overnight. It happened in whispers, in silence, and in the moments no one thought would matter. But they did, and today we're going to revisit them. One by one. Let's begin. There are times in a marriage where you become so angry, you feel, maybe I could just walk away. But for Robyn, times like that just pass and return without ever shifting her comfortable stand. Robyn might not have forgotten the family's lowly roots, but it appears as though she'd rather act as if they never existed. On season 14, episode 8, Robyn drops the bombshell that the owners of her rental house are going to sell. That leaves her in need of a new home. And fast. Cody, always the mastermind, suggests what looks like a sensible solution. Why not bring a single wide trailer in on Coyote Pass as a temporary solution? Robyn puts the kibosh on that quickly. Nope, sorry, done that, she says, her voice near revulsion at the suggestion. Do you know how cold a single wide is? The actual chill wasn't the trailer. It was Robyn's response. Cody reminds her they all lived that way before. We all lived in France. He jokes, talking about the single wide trailers where they used to live. It'd be temporary. But the other wives don't laugh. They just stare at her, confused and a little offended. They all remember. Trailer living wasn't an asterisk. It was part of the origin myth for this family. They fought together, side by side. Robyn was there for all the conversations, all the recaps, all the communal memory of those earliest, scrappiest days. And now she's acting like it's new news. I didn't know you guys had lived in trailers, she says. Yes, we were all there, the others remind her. Nobody else appears to have forgotten. At some point along the way, Robyn ceased telling the story and began to rewrite it. By this stage, 8 or 9 years into her marriage to Cody, it's not merely that she's out of touch. It's that she's placing herself above the life they all shared together. Suddenly the trailer lifestyle is not good enough for her. This wasn't a matter of preference. This was about image, and her refusal to compromise for the benefit of the group. This was not a fleeting moment. This was part of a much broader pattern. Robyn has the ability to locate herself at the center of every conversation. In reference to suffering, hers is more profound. When speaking of adversity, her own cuts deeper. Her demands, always just a mite more urgent. She's talked a lot about her hard early life. No heat, no crib, just scraping by. Yet today Robyn appears to have an appetite for only the finest houses, designer furniture and frequent upgrades. It's a striking contrast to the humble collaborative vibe the rest of the clan attempts to uphold. She discusses sacrifice, but rarely practices it. Now to get clear, Cody is accountable for his own actions, but it's difficult not to observe how frequently Robyn's wishes somehow become the family's agendas. That double-wide trailer on Coyote Pass wasn't a whim, it was an actual plan, an economical one. Cody even offered to stay in it overnight. Janelle and Savannah, despite the hassle, endorsed it as well. But Robyn? She didn't just say no, she resisted hard, complaining, raising issues, citing all the reasons why it would never work. And in an instant, the plan was killed. Rather than investing in building on the land, as everyone had initially planned, they shifted funds to procure Robyn another rental. Her comfort prevailed once more, and each time her comfort prevails, the family loses. This action put the Coyote Pass project far behind, despite the fact that Robyn had always professed to be its biggest supporter. Ironically, in her refusal to change, she put the brakes on the very progress she professed to desire. It wasn't pragmatism, it was self-destruction in the guise of worry, and it didn't end there. Another emotional flashpoint came around the way Robyn's kids were treated by the other wives and their children. At one point, a simple issue spiraled into accusations. "You've always treated us so badly," Robyn said tearfully. "I'm tired of working on this, but is it mistreatment or just a convenient narrative?" Let's start again from the start. When Robyn made her spiritual marriage with Cody, her children were still young, 10, 8, and 6. And if you look at some of those early shows, it's clear to see they were accepted openly, playing in the yard, participating in group hugs, opening Christmas gifts. They weren't strangers. They were in the midst of family life. If you were paying attention, you may have seen it, kids struggling, giggling, even a bit roughhousing around Christmas treats. At one point, one of the boys even punched one of Robyn's daughters. And strangely enough, that wasn't a sign that someone was excluded. It was just normal in a large blended family. That's how the Brown home was: boisterous, noisy, and full of the kind of sibling brawls that come from being too close for too long. Welcome to the Brown family's production of the Nativity play, complete with costumes, giggles, and a dozen children all jammed into one raucous production. For years, these kids ran like one giant pack. You had no idea who belonged to whom. They shared birthday parties, inside jokes, and hugs. So when Robyn now asserts that her kids were made to feel like outsiders from day one, it's like a revision of history. And the saddest part, her children appear to accept it. At some point, Robyn and Cody redefine themselves as victims. The only way their account makes sense is if they twist the past to conform to the narrative they're now using. There is a moment where Robyn is talking about one of her kids looking at her in fear in their eyes, as if to say, "Are you going to reject me too?" But the question is, where did that fear originate from? Because what we've seen is that her kids were accepted in the beginning. Robyn's own fear of being rejected has turned into Cody's reason to avoid taking responsibility, rather than meet the reality that so much of the family's disintegration originated in his own decisions. Cody plays into Robyn's fears. And she allows it. If Robyn ever sat down to really speak with the other wives, or simply talked of the pain, she'd realize something critical. Most of the cracks in the family originated with Cody going off on his own. But she didn't reach out. She pulled away. She and Cody made the decision to pull their kids from family traditions, like the annual gift exchange. They said it was to protect the children, but it came off like punishment for the rest of the family. The message was clear. You've hurt us, so we're out. What started as distance became a quiet withdrawal that left deep cracks in the family foundation. Robyn's emotional retreat wasn't sudden. It built over time. What we've seen from her is someone overwhelmed, possibly struggling with emotional wounds that never healed. And instead of facing that head-on, she took the easier path: isolation. Ironically, her children didn't feel displaced until much later, namely the COVID years. That's when the gulf became unbridgeable. While other wives and children attempted to maintain bonds of family, delivering gifts, waving hello from afar, Robyn's home was closed to them. She worded it in terms of warning, but it also served the useful purpose of affirming the narrative that they don't care about us. Any refusal or unmet expectation was grist for a bigger ideology, that her family was being spurned. Actually, her children were being fed a narrative, deliberately constructed to make every letdown feel like betrayal. Robyn didn't isolate her children. She provided them with the language to feel abandoned. It all comes down to something very personal. Robyn never felt accepted by the other wives. Rather than accepting her place in this, she placed the emotional burden on her children. And that's where the damage really escalated. It's one thing to be a stranger in your own land. It's another to raise your children on the idea that they're victims because of it. And it's maddening to listen to Robyn talk about her children being bullied or treated unfairly, without acknowledging the complexity of what the initial children endured. Overnight, they needed to accommodate 3 new siblings, see them refer to their father as dad, and adjust to an entirely new reality, all without having much room to express confusion or loss. Nobody asked how they felt. Robyn didn't accept her kids. She accepted to elevate them. She treated them as if they were part of herself from the beginning. Any teasing or resistance wasn't about the kids. It was an affront to her, and that defensiveness is not typically born out of entitlement. It's often born out of pain, particularly the sort based in childhood. Robyn has talked about feeling left out, invisible when she was growing up. It's probably those old wounds influenced how she navigated this family. But rather than letting her kids grow beyond that, she transferred her injuries. And those injuries warped the way her children lived the rest of the Browns. When the original children teased, tested one another, or sparred a bit, that wasn't cruelty. That was par for the course. In this family, to be teased was to be accepted. But Robyn's children weren't accustomed to that. And when they didn't receive what they wanted, they interpreted it as rejection. "We're never going to want families of our own after this," one of the children said. That's how acutely the dysfunction penetrated. It wasn't that it was chaos. It was agonizing enough for them to consider wanting to avoid family in their own lives altogether. That sort of declaration doesn't happen by accident. It builds upon years of tension, miscommunication, and a keen feeling that house rules were never quite equitable. Robyn's children joined the family with expectations, ones that didn't always mesh with the reality of fitting into an already complicated dynamic. And when the going got rough, the consequences were overwhelming. Robyn didn't merely want inclusion, she demanded loyalty, adoration, and unthinking devotion. When the rest of the family did not cooperate, Robyn rewrote the story. In hers, she and her children were always on the outside. They were the ones abused, misjudged, and everyone else. The problem. This tradition of rewriting history wasn't only emotional, it was acted out in practical terms, as well. Who could forget the birthday party, at the McMansion? Really was the guest of honor. 9 guests were invited, but only 6 pieces of chicken were present at the table. 1 plate for each person was the strategy. Unless you wanted seconds. To complete the circle, there were topped potatoes, complete with bacon bits. And dates wrapped in, you guessed it, bacon. Yes, bacon. From the same family where Cody once boycotted pork for spiritual reasons. It was a moment that summed up the contradictions perfectly. Cody once refused to eat pork in Hawaii, on grounds of religious belief. But at home, he ate bacon like it was no big deal. That's not spiritual conviction. It's convenience masquerading as conviction. This cycle of conflicted beliefs has continued to plague Cody for years. His values and beliefs change based on the circumstance. One day it's kosher dining, and the next it's bacon-wrapped hors d'oeuvres. One season, he's referencing scripture. The following, he's rationalizing actions that are the direct opposite. Cody's faith hasn't become deeper. It's fragmented and ego-driven. Gradually his spiritual foundation began to erode. To the public he asserted himself as rooted in religion. Behind closed doors, that foundation was evaporating. The reality is, he wasn't leading from a position of spiritual strength. He was holding on to concepts that allowed him to control, particularly in a family format that had once placed him in a place of higher status. Religion was used as a tool, not as a source of wisdom or peace. When he didn't get what he wanted, he switched to a new belief system. He took bits and pieces from here and there, constructing an ideology that met his current requirements. And it always seemed to boil down to the same thing: power. The doctrine was changed, the explanations were altered, but the objective remained the same. Cody in charge. What was initially introduced as godly leadership slowly became apparent as manipulation disguised as righteousness. This was not about leading the family, it was about controlling them. One of the most obvious was when Cody suddenly announced they had to exit Las Vegas in 3 months. He mentioned money problems, but the haste was last minute and suspect. It seemed as though he decided, and then constructed a justification afterward. Robyn, who looked shocked on television, just expressed how much she hated Las Vegas, like she was attempting to make the suggestion sound like a two-way street, when in fact the decision had been made. Then they went to Flagstaff with her, an impromptu visit, or at least it was presented that way. And wouldn't you just know, they adored it. Too much almost. Cody started singing the praises of the city right away. The enthusiasm wasn't subtle, it came across as rehearsed. Then arrived the actual show. Cody brought Christine on a jaunt to Flagstaff, spun as a romantic escape. But his actual agenda was obvious. He was attempting to sell her on the relocation. There was a queer flash of tenderness, as if charm could oil the fissures. Suddenly all the gears found their wives having their own versions of the Flagstaff pitch, specifically tailored to them. With Mary, it was presented to her as a new beginning, a second chance to do over what had fallen apart. For Janelle, there was less idealism, and more resignation. She appeared to acquiesce to it, not because she believed, but because she was worn out by the constant pushing. "This is our goodbye in the cul-de-sac," someone remarked, as if by the way. But it was more than a farewell. It was a closing of an age. The emotional significance of the moment was thick, particularly for the older kids. They'd finally settled into Las Vegas. After years of uncertainty, they had actual houses, long-term friendships,
and even left handprints in cement and planted trees to memorialize their memories. But all of that was forgotten. The children's origins were hardly recognized, because Cody and Robyn had already selected the next installment. The move was not done with open agreement. It was pushed as something urgent and essential. And although the rest of the family struggled to get on the same wavelength emotionally, Cody and Robyn rushed forward. Before long, they were cozily ensconced in a large home in Flagstaff, and later relocated to a second mansion, while the rest of the family only grew more broken. Christine, being always pragmatic, opted to purchase her own place rather than rent. It was not merely about possession, it was about control, safety, and perhaps a quiet preparation for what she knew was on its way. Janelle, however, had once been resolute. She wouldn't uproot her children, particularly during school years. Eventually, though, she relented, and when she did, the promised payoffs of that decision never materialized. What arrived instead was money frustration and legal grief, both related to her contributions. Christine's choice provided her with an exit strategy. Janelle was left stuck in bureaucratic quicksand. It has been rumored that Cody had to exit Christine's title to the property so he could get a mortgage on Robyn's house. If that's the case, that right there says a lot about the financial juggling going on behind the scenes. Every action had a consequence, and not everyone was privy to the whole picture. It wasn't merely about property. Relatives such as Matt, Caleb, Michelle, Logan, even Garrison discussed perhaps relocating to Flagstaff. On the outside, it appeared that the entire family was considering the future as a unit. However, timing said something else. When the relocation to Flagstaff was announced, it perfectly coincided with Dayton's intention to go to college at NAU. It begged questions. Was this really an impromptu transition, or had the choice been made with Robyn's family already on board and the rest to magically fall into place? It didn't seem like a family decision. It seemed like a scripted rollout. Years ago, they had already departed Lehi suddenly. Now, just when Vegas homes became settled and calm, the Browns were disrupted once more. Vows of stability receded into the distance, giving way to anxiety, economic stress, and increasing emotional distance. And here's the thing, Robyn wasn't some innocent bystander in this story. She was a key architect. In season 14, it becomes almost impossible to deny. Robyn and Cody had every intention of buying a home from the very beginning. In one scene, Cody says flat out, "We're down to 5 days, we have to make an offer." There was a rush, but it wasn't about survival, it was about securing a lifestyle. Robyn's and Janelle's Las Vegas residences were already sold, and that added to the pressure to make a fast decision. And that's just what Cody and Robyn did. Far ahead of the rest of the family had a say. Still, Robyn portrayed herself as reluctant. On camera, she was emotional, even tearful. "I feel like I'm betraying my family," she said, eyes welling up. She talked about how buying a house could hurt her marriage to Cody. But behind the tears, she and Cody were fully aligned. It was a show, an emotional buffer designed to break the strain of criticism while delivering to them precisely what they'd already devised. In public, she acted the part of reluctant wife. Behind closed doors, she was forging power alliances. Even the house she'd been leasing at the time had a tale to tell. Priced originally at $3,500 a month in 2018, it came onto the market the next year for $975,000 and ended up selling for $925,000. That timing, that fell into her campaign to buy. It all seemed abrupt, but in fact, the elements were already there, whether or not the timing was convenient. One thing was certain, Robyn and Cody were more than prepared to move into their million-dollar house, despite all the public pandering and second-guessing they exhibited on television.
Cody used to say, "Maybe we should buy." And Robyn's answer, a definite "I don't want to buy." But as we've learned time and again, that's Robyn's characteristic tact. Say no first. So it appears as if she's making a reluctant concession when the choice finally goes her way. She says no to stage a yes that favors her. It's an image management tactic. Robyn portrays herself as the gentle partner, Cody as the aggressive decision-maker. But the truth? Robyn gets exactly what she wants, without ever having to appear to have asked for it. She's been striving from the start to be perceived as the voice of reason, the level head. Behind the scenes, though, she's been subtly steering the vessel. It's a convincing act, no doubt. But the outcomes speak louder than her words. The emotional displays, the tears, the "I'm just confused" routine. It all forms a pattern. Her confusion is less of a response, and more of a tell. A signal. A mask. Whenever Robyn acts confused, it usually means things didn't go as planned. Take season 19, episode 16. Cody, during a tense moment while they're riding quads, admits he's been mad enough to think about leaving her. The second it leaves his mouth, he immediately apologizes. And right on cue, Robyn retreats into that dazed, unsure expression, the hurt and confused face we've seen so many times. The instant she does that, Cody folds, he backtracks, changes voice, almost as if he knows he crossed a boundary she didn't want recorded on tape. That exchange, as many of theirs have been of late, doesn't ring true. It reads like a scene that wasn't fully rehearsed. Robyn's default language, hurt, confused, unsafe, has become her emotional armor. And funnily enough, even one of the original wives is onto it. In a moment of confession, she wonders if Robyn's confusion is as real as she wishes other people to think it is. After all these seasons, the cracks are beginning to appear, and others are taking notice. Cody's actions in all of this aren't just infuriating. They follow a pattern too. They reflect the characteristics of narcissistic personalities: fighting, picking, victim playing, blaming, and rationalizing poor behavior through theatrics. Robyn herself has said she used to tell Cody that he picks fights on a regular basis and behaves like a man who's getting divorced. And it doesn't take much to notice that he uses drama as a tool, creating tension so he can prove himself in the aftermath. When the drama erupts, it isn't always about emotion, it's sometimes about control. Whether or not there is another woman in the background isn't known. But this does bear mentioning. Narcissists who feed on triangulation, placing individuals against one another, tend not to stop at a single emotional anchor. But even if that is taking place, Robyn would probably remain. Stability, and more so financially, are her priorities. There is one scene in season 8, episode 3 that tells it all. Cody, feeling the pressure during a tense dinner, erupts in mock sorrow. "I'm not a bad husband. I'm not a bad guy." The delivery, straight out of a soap opera. It's not remorse, it's performance. He even adds, "I started blaming myself," as though the idea were absurd. He rambles on about women's biology, and how men just don't understand, trying to sound deep, but mostly just digging himself into a hole. Janelle wasn't having it, and her silence said more than words ever could. In her couch interview afterward, she calls it out plainly. "I'm sick of women being reduced to their biological functions." Then, in the moment itself, she quietly excuses herself from the dinner table, gracefully removing herself before things got worse. It wasn't a meltdown, it was strength. Quiet strength. Silent protest based on dignity and years of emotional control. She didn't have to scream. Walking away was strong enough. That scene encapsulated what so many of the wives have gone through over the years. In the earlier seasons, there was a tacit rule in the Brown family. Remain sweet. That expression was not about remaining calm, it was how to cut off any disagreement. If the children fought, the retort was easy. Keep sweet. That was the sentiment set for everyone, particularly the wives. For decades, confrontation had been equated with betrayal, not expression. Remaining sweet required maintaining the appearance of peace. Even when everything was unraveling in private, feelings had to be hidden, so the image of harmony would not be shattered. But with time, that dictate started to fray. And when finally it did, the outcome was undeniable. Janelle, ever calm and reserved, finally lost her cool. It came during a Christmas fight, a moment of genuine turning point. The woman who had lived for years with swallowing frustration finally told the truth, and Christine? She acted. After deciding, she packed up Cody's belongings and moved them out right into the garage. That action spoke all that she hadn't spoken out loud for years. Sometimes the most taciturn women take the greatest leaps. Despite all the emotion, there was a pragmatic aspect to these decisions. After one of her solo vacations, Janelle could have simply receded into obscurity. She could have remained in the marriage, stayed on the show unobtrusively, and avoided controversy. But she didn't. She decided to just keep coming back. Not only for the cameras, but for herself. She did not flee from the chaos. She remained within it. And that courage, that resilience to keep going forward, even as the ground beneath was shaking, that's what so many viewers resonated with. She didn't vacate the spotlight. She took back her voice in it.